This case was related to UFO PLAS investigator back in 1964 and was featured in the third edition of the Panorama magazine. The witness was a religious man with a keen interest in electronics. The experience occurred when he was still very young, all the way back in 1911, in Gumeracha, Australia. Gumeracha is only a few miles from Adelaide. His father owned a farm there, and the witness was milking some cows. He recalls that he had just finished filling 2 buckets of milk when he was getting ready to pick them up to place them on a nearby stand. It was while carrying them he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his head. After carefully placing the buckets down, he put his hand to his head in the spot where the pain was flaring. It was then he observed, in front of him, some distance away, a disc-shaped object. It was about 10 feet across and was silvery and glowing like the moon. He watched it for some 15 seconds, and then it rose into the air and disappeared at a very high rate of speed into the horizon. Soon after, the sharp pain he felt dissipated. At the time, he had no idea what flying saucers were, and had not a clue what he had observed that day, though he suspected that the object, whatever it was somehow responsible for the momentary pain he felt. He told no one of the experience, fearing ridicule from his peers. It was many, many years later when he felt comfortable enough to relate his strange sighting. The investigator who was told of the experience noted that the case proves that the phenomenon had been around for a very, very long time. Gumeracha was also the setting for another equally bizarre UFO incident. This one happened in 1984 and was referenced in the Australasian Post, November 29, 1984. UFO investigator Colin Norris spoke to the witness and put her in contact with reporter Wayne Lowen for the article. Mrs. J. Kowalski was driving her 4 children home at 7:50 one night in 1984 in Gumeracha when they observed an aircraft they took to be a low-flying helicopter. It was the size of a Boeing 707 and lacked the obvious things our aircraft have. It made no noise whatsoever except a swoosh. There was a large light hanging on a dome underneath, and it seemed to be on an extendable arm. It was very, very bright, and there were lots of lights on the undercarriage. Kowalski claims she stopped the car and she and the children got out. Kowalski wanted to get a better look at the object. It was a silver blue metallic color, unlike anything I've ever seen, she recalled. I can't relate it to anything I know. Obviously it was observing us, and it was coming closer, and I think it would have landed if I hadn't run away. While she did not feel threatened in that moment, she did sense that it would be in her best interest to gather the children and leave the area, which she did. It's interesting to think what might have happened to Kowalski and her children had they chosen to remain, especially if this craft did indeed land as she suspected it might have. In February 1987, something was tracked on radar in Alaska that officials had trouble explaining away. This account appeared in the April 7, 1978 edition of the Tacoma, Washington News Tribune. It began on the evening of February 16, 1978, when personnel at a radar installation observed, quote, 5 round glowing objects that appeared to hover, then zip back and forth at incredible speed. This occurred over the desolate Shemya Island, part of the Aleutian chain in Alaska. An unidentified crew member of the C-141 Air Force plane flying nearby related the bizarre incident to the newspaper. He noted that he and his crew had not personally observed the objects. We had landed our cargo and had taken off on the return flight when we got a call from the controller on Shemya. The tower controller informed the C-141 crew that UFOs had followed them. They apparently, quote, changed color from red to orange to violet and moved faster than any aircraft. Then unidentified blips suddenly appeared on the base radar screens. They also appeared to hover and would disappear and reappear suddenly. If that wasn't strange enough, at the same time the objects were being seen and tracked, an earthquake suddenly shook the island. It appeared strongest near the highly classified Cobra Dane radar installation. When the ground stopped moving, the glowing objects were gone, and the radar screens were clear, the witness told this to the newspaper. The Alaska Air Defense Command confirmed the incident in a report, writing, "On the evening of February 16, 1978, there was an earth tremor measured at 4.0 to 4.2 on the Richter scale that shook the Cobra Dane and other facilities on the Shemya Air Force Base, located near the tip of the Aleutian Island chain. As the tremor occurred, some Shemya personnel ran from the buildings and thought they saw bright lights hovering over the island. A check of the Shemya radar verified that there were unidentified blips on the radar screen." Curiously, in the weeks that followed, the Air Force launched an investigation that attempted to explain away the events of that February evening. The results were as laughable as you might expect. The bright lights witnessed by the personnel zipping about in the sky, they explained, were actually planets and stars. They further determined that waves from the ocean were responsible for the radar captures. So essentially, they weren't even trying. So were waves and planets responsible for the events of that February evening? Or is there a more out-of-this-world explanation? I want to get away from the UFO topic for a bit and talk about another strange case I read recently that happened in the woods of Ohio. It involved a strange smell, a strange creature, and a period of missing time. It was November 2019, Thompson, Ohio. A witness claims he was visiting his aunt's house when her pooch, Penny, somehow got out of the yard. A hunting party was soon assembled, consisting of the young witness, his sister, and the aunt. They each grabbed a flashlight and headed out into the dark stretch of woods behind her home. They determined that splitting up would be the best way to cover more acres. Despite only looking away for a brief moment, the witness had gone deeper into the tree line than he realized, and suddenly found himself in a spot of forest he was not familiar with. As he attempted to get his bearings, he suddenly got whiffed of a strange smell, a type of electrical discharge he likened to the smell of static. To make matters worse, his flashlight began to dim. Lost and with a dimming flashlight, the witness began to feel uneasy. He hollered out for his aunt and sister, though, to his surprise, he received no reply. They weren't that far away. How could they not hear him? As he walked around looking for the tree line, he began to hear the cracking of twigs and branches. It was footsteps. 2 feet walking. Somebody was coming through the woods in his direction. He assumed that it was his aunt or sister coming to check on him. Spinning around, the witness claims he saw something absolutely terrifying. There, in the darkness of the woods, he made out a thin, stick-like figure. It was running at him, its arms waving wildly. He likened its movements to one of those balloon statues you see fluttering outside of a car dealership. The witness became terrified and began to run. He ran as fast as he could, eventually finding himself out of the woods. He claims that he collapsed and fell unconscious, possibly due to overexertion. When he finally woke up, he was sitting in his parents' car as they drove home. He never told them about what he saw that day. Later, he confided in his aunt the events of that evening. While she had no explanation for what he experienced, she did relate some interesting details, including that prior to their visit, they had also had strange things happen in those woods. For instance, the uncle also got lost, and similarly, he smelled a strange electrical smell. He managed to find his way out before anything else happened, though. The aunt admitted to having seen something in the woods once, and she also confessed to having smelled that static smell while searching for Penny that night. Ultimately, Penny was found, and the events of that evening remain a mystery.